Micah, and I am in long-term recovery. I want to tell you a little bit about what happened and what it's like now. I was born in 1984. I'm 31 years old today, and my using career started at a very young age. I did my first line of crystal meth at 12 in 1996 with a family member, and from that moment on, my life was completely chaotic. Everything that would naturally be of heart came by the wayside, as far as my school and my family and my loved ones. All those came second to none. Like most people, I went to jail many a times between the age of 12 and 21 for several different things, many DUIs and possession charges along the way. I remember at about 17 years old, I thought it would be a good idea to start school because I was going to become an entrepreneur and sell things, things that belong to you, things that belong to me, real things and fake things. So that career lasted about 2 weeks, and I realized that I had made a big mistake. So I'm from a small town in North Alabama, and I thought the best thing for me to do would be to move because the problems lied in everyone else but not myself. And so the town I'm from is a very small, not culturally diverse town at all, and I decided the best place to move to would be Atlanta, Georgia. And I did that. At 17 years old, I showed up in Atlanta at a bus station at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I was scared to death. I got a hotel room at a place called All Around Suites, and there was nothing sweet about the place. You did not come outside after 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock, or you would be robbed. And I found me a job at a Waffle House there, and I met a girl, and I had my own hotel room. She had her own hotel room, and we thought what we could do is just bring those hotel rooms together and start a family. So she got pregnant, and I moved away from Atlanta. She came to me, I remember her telling me, I'm pregnant, Micah, and I told her good luck with that one. I was 18 at the time, and I had a lot to do. At this time, my addiction was in full blown. When I said things like, I love you, that meant you better watch your back. That meant I was coming after you. At that age, I called my mother and I asked her if I could come home. I had nowhere to go to. She lived in South Florida, and she said, you can come here, Micah, as long as you don't bring anything with you. And of course, I thought that meant don't bring a lot of stuff with me. So I got to her house in Bradenton, Florida, and I stayed up for about 2 weeks painting her car in the garage that did not belong to me, and shortly thereafter, she asked me to leave. It was one of the first of many times my mother bought me a bus ticket away from her. She said, I don't care where you go, but you're not staying here. And I remember so many times I would look that woman in the eye and I would promise her mother, I promise you, I'll do it this time. And she would give me another chance, and every time I would steal from her. I would steal from my stepfather. I would steal from my brothers. And every time she would tell me to leave. And back then I didn't know what kind of hell I put my family through, but in time I would know. So I left there and I went back to the town I moved to Atlanta from, and I met a girl, and we had a baby. And for the next 5 years, it was what I knew of a relationship. It was terrible. It was very violent, volatile. I did not work. I did not support my family. Anything, I bought them the least amount I could to make sure I would have what I wanted. And by this time I had been in jail probably 10 to 15 times in my early 20s for the first DUIs I got. I got out of because a lawyer helped me get out of them and things like that. But at age 25, 26, I finally had gotten to a point to where I had run everybody out of my life. Nobody wanted to be around me. I was not allowed to be around my children. I was not allowed to be in the same room as my mother. When I would call them, she would not answer. And so the next few years I lived on the streets in North Alabama, doing whatever it took to get what I wanted. And if that meaning hurting you or your children, that's exactly what I would do. I remember the very last time I did anything, I had been on a several-day run, and I had money in my pocket, but I couldn't find what I wanted. And for a person in my situation at that time, that was hell on earth. Rather be dead than not be able to get what I wanted. And I remember the person I was with, the nice gentleman that I was with, we rounded up just a little bit of it and I remember him waving it in front of me, and he said, "What would you do for this?" And I remember in that very moment, I would have done anything he asked me to do for that little amount, because that's why I was. Drugs had finally, had a long time before, but had finally become my master, to where I would lower my morals to match my actions, just to get that fix. And I was an IV user by this time. I had no problem using needles after anybody that used them did not care about my life or yours. That very night that all that happened, I remember I had just enough money to get a hotel room, and I was staying there, and I woke up about 2 o'clock in the morning, and that night was the last night I ever had to go to jail. That was October 16th of 2012, and I remember when they picked me up that night, the police picked me up, I had a sense of peace about me, because number one, I knew where I was going to get my next meal at. I knew what was going to happen to me. I knew where I would be the next day. I did not have to look ahead, and from that moment on, my life actually started looking up. The courts in Alabama decided it would be best for me to go to treatment for 6 months. They had picked me up on several charges stemming from traffic violations, driving no license, and things like that. And they offered me a treatment center in Sylacauga. My mother flew up from South Florida. My brother came down from Memphis, Tennessee to pick me up, and they got me there. Sylacauga, that was where it first started at. I'd been in jail for about 4 months. And when I went there, I actually started learning a lot about my disease. I never saw it as a disease. I thought I was just a bad person, scorned by God, and a victim of circumstances. But they started teaching me about these compulsions and things like that. And when I was there for only 21 days, which was just enough time to kind of get everything together, they wanted me to go to a halfway house in Dothan, Alabama. And that's what I did. I got down there and I got busy building relationships with people inside of recovery, and making healthy relationships something I knew nothing about. The relationships with my children were restored after I had been around for a while, after I stayed sober for a year or two. The relationship with my mother has come full circle. I remember I went to my brother's wedding last year, and one thing that my brother said, they said, "Thank you for giving me my mother back," because there were so many times toward my end, her and my brothers were having to make the decision, would they cremate me or would they bury me, because that's how bad it had gotten. And they were just waiting on that phone call at night when the phone would ring and those cold chills would go down my mother's back, knowing that this was the call, that my son is finally dead. Since coming into recovery, my life has changed completely. All I knew was alcohol and drugs for so long. That's it. That's all. That took precedent over everything in my life. Being sober for a few years now, I actually have a full-time job. I've worked out for over 2 years. I haven't missed a day yet. I see my children regularly. My youngest daughter I don't get to see yet, because when I got sober, I was under the delusion that everything would come back, and that's just not the case, unfortunately. No matter how good or how well I become, some people will still see me the same way, and that's okay, because the odds are far greater if I stay sober as opposed to going back. Now that I haven't put drugs in my body in a few years, I have a choice today. If I wanted to go back or if I want to stay where I'm at. And if I ever go back, it's because of a choice that I made. I work in treatment now. I work in a treatment center down in Dothan, Alabama. I work with recovering alcoholics and drug addicts all the time. This weekend I'm actually headed to a conference in North Alabama, and I'm not running from anything. I have found a peace inside myself because not picking up today, and that's really all I can do. What I do today to help me stay sober is to help other individuals like you. And what I promise you is, if somebody like me can get sober and live a happy life and not have to look over their shoulders and not have to run from the police and not have to check in with a probation officer or a parole officer, you can do it too. There is hope, and that's why I do things like this, share my story, because individuals like me who have been where I've been and where I'm at now, years ago they would have told you there's no hope for Micah. But now today what I carry is hope, because recovery has given me that hope.